Helderberg calls now.
Sorry for the delay.
Okay, great, thank you. I'm going to mute everyone. So you can unmute yourself if you need to speak, but for now everyone will be muted except myself. So welcome to everyone on this public holiday, and thank you especially to Pieter, our presenter today, who was prepared to do the talk on the public holiday. All the paid up members have been invited to today's meeting. There was no change in the number of paid up members during the past month. I received apologies from Anne Wilson, Angela Wooden, Penny Lowe and Brian Crystal, so thanks for that. I know you're familiar by now with all the Zoom housekeeping rules, but just in case, let me just repeat a few basic ones. I'm the host for this meeting with Derick and Mike Reynolds as my co-hosts. You can raise your hand in front of your camera if you need attention or if you want to ask a question, but you can also use the chat panel to type your questions and we will monitor the chat panel during the presentation. It's also important to keep the chat panel open because at the end of the meeting, as you know by now, I'll post links in there, and today there will be other links as well. I'll get to that just now. If you don't know where the chat panel is, just look at the bottom of your screen of the Zoom meeting window and there's a chat panel icon. It's like a toggle switch. If you click it once, it opens the chat panel on the right hand side. If you click it again, it closes the chat panel. Please keep your microphone muted unless you are asked to speak. And like usual, the registration for the meeting happens at the end. You will have the opportunity to rate the meeting overall as well as rate today's presenter. The meeting is being recorded for possible or for use by the members of this group. I do edit the recording afterwards, so just bear with me afterwards, but I will send the link of the recording out to you and then you can watch it at any time on YouTube. Now today's meeting on this public holiday, I chose a slightly less taxing topic. However, I don't expect any less enthusiasm from Pieter, the presenter, or less fascinating content. There will be opportunity for questions at the end of his presentation. Now, after Pieter's presentation, there will be another practical tip or application in this case for your everyday use of your computer or smartphone. Today, we will handle it slightly different by viewing the tutorial during the meeting and have time to discuss it afterwards. So I will tell you more about that later once we've listened to Pieter. The topic today is called Headlines from the Future. It's a book written by Pieter Geldenhuys and Mia Slobbert. Now, Pieter is a well-known presenter to this group, and like always, he was more than willing to do another presentation even on this public holiday. Pieter will present an overview of the book, but will also discuss the tendencies and the technology behind the news stories that he captured in the book. Pieter told me this is the start of an international launch of the book, and he welcomes the opportunity to present it to us so that he can get some feedback, whether it's positive or negative. Pieter also made a PDF copy of the book available to all the paid-up members of the NIR. All he expects in return is comments in the form of a review of the book on Amazon, where he actually sell the book.
Johan, if I may ask, they can just send me an email as well. I believe that right now I can improve the book somewhat. As I haven't launched it, it would be more beneficial for me to actually get the comment, even if it's honest, cut-to-the-bone comment from the participants. I think if we may just ask that response.
Okay, so should they not post
Not-
a review on Amazon? Because
So-
I checked it and there is a place where you can actually
Yes.
do it.
Johan, I'm going to change the forward of the book, and I'll explain that in a moment. So
Okay.
there's going to be a changed version. The stories will relatively stay the same, but I'm going to add perhaps one or two stories and perhaps change the forward. But I would love to get some feedback from the participants in this panel. I think it would be very valid if I can get their learned opinion, get an idea of their learned opinion.
Okay, so you'll see later when we get to the registration form, I did include a link there, but as you've heard now, I think you can ignore that, and we will rather use an email back to me to pass on to Pieter your comments. But we'll have time to discuss it afterwards and ask questions. So Pieter, for now, it's over to you. I'm going to mute myself and then you can take over.
Thank you, Johan, and thank you for the opportunity. This is the first time that I'm actually discussing the book with anyone. But what I would ask you on is an interactive session. We don't have a lot of time. There's 37 stories. I've made the link available on the chat, and the participants on this call can download the book, look at some of the stories, and they can literally choose which of the stories they would like me to take further. So maybe a good idea is to talk about the book and what it's about. There's an interesting philosopher, it's a futurist at the University of Hawaii, a guy called Jim Data. And he's got the second law of futures, which says that any useful idea about the future should appear to be ridiculous. And if you ask, well, what's the first law? There isn't any. He started at the second. So, this is literally how we talk about the future, because if you already know about the future, let's talk about the Boring Company or space travel or whatever. These are things individuals already know. By talking about a future that seems to be ridiculous, a kind of a headline format, I believe there's a bigger chance of talking about the interaction of various trends and how it will play out in the future. So this book is not about technology. It's literally about economics, geopolitics, social trends, and technology all interwoven. And that's the whole idea behind the book. I made the big mistake of writing an 8 or 9 page foreword, and I gave the book to 3 or 4 people and they stopped reading in the foreword. Although those that persevered and looked at the stories found the stories far more interesting. So that means I'm going to swap the entire book around, and I'd like it to make it truly interactive. So I hope that you can see my screen. I'll show you what the stories are all about. And you can then take a look at some of these stories and tell me which ones you find more interesting that you'd like me to go deeper into. So the first one is Amazon being furious about anti-flying pineapple technology. I actually do love that one a lot. That's why I put it first. So I will share with you why Amazon is truly furious about anti-flying pineapple technology. So you can see a number of stories. These are the headlines. You can find it in your chat as well. And I'm going to stay on this page for a moment or two, and you can make a couple of notes. And then after I've done the first story, you can then nominate the next story that you would like to go into. So I wrote this book with news headlines. I normally joke with my wife, she looks at a poster of a newspaper and then say, I wonder what that means. And I say, well, that's what the newspaper editors want you to do. There's a news headline that captures your imagination and you would like to know more. And that's literally what I've done here. I've written about a number of possible stories that might occur in years ahead. And I must admit that my timeline might be out, because I think COVID-19 played havoc with the timelines. And when we finished the book a good couple of months ago, we did it based on our assessment of where the world would be heading. So some of them are out of date. I might have to repurpose them, but that's the whole idea. So there's a couple of stories, the first 15 that you will see on the screen. You can choose which ones you like. There's a few ones that sound completely absurd, and that's literally where we're going to take this conversation. So there is millions that's going to be lost in the real estate bubble, and if you wonder what that means, real estate will not only have problems in the real world, but in the virtual world as well. We're talking about the possible end of stealth. A huge amount of money being put into stealth aircraft, but there might be technology that might trump it already. We're seeing that Volvo might launch a virtual crumple zone linked to brainwaves. And then there's some very weird stories around deep fakes that might make millions in the World Cup. For those of you that don't know what a deep fake is, it is an image or a video of a person with another person's face superimposed over it. So we made some predictions around the possible financial benefit of deep fakes. And then there's a couple of others, such as certain type of feces reaching a very, very high price in the open market. We'll explain that as well. So high price paid for superior stool samples. So those are some of the more ridiculous articles. You'll see where some of them are heading, but you're more than welcome to click on the book, look at some of the articles, and then ask me where you would like to take it. But to take you down the first rabbit hole, let's talk about the first story, and that is Amazon being furious about anti-flying pineapple technology. All right, so where does this come from? There's a device called a Hack5 pineapple, and it doesn't look like a normal pineapple. It's actually a small device that you could put on a drone. And what hackers are doing is to take this drone, put a 4G little modem on it, and then land this drone on a corporate head office. But what they do is they give the Wi-Fi hotspot name of the drone the exact same name as the company's corporate Wi-Fi. So you'll go to a corporate, let's say Discovery, and then you will, or Discovery Corporate, and then this drone will have the exact same Wi-Fi name as the corporate one. It will park on the roof, and you as an individual would then log in and you'll see two Wi-Fi hotspots. And as you click, it says, please type in your password. And you're like, come on, you know, I did it yesterday. What the hell's wrong? And then you type in the corporate password. The moment you do so, this device picks it up and then relogs you into the corporate environment. We call it a man-in-the-middle attack, where all of the data that you think you're connecting to your corporate server is going via this drone, which now has access to your Wi-Fi password. And then it'll say, type in your username and password for your own personal account, at which point in time, this drone will record everything and all types of activity. And let's say 20 other people come in and they click on the wrong Wi-Fi hotspot. And at this point in time, the login will be automatic because the password will already be known. And all of their screens and all of their data can now be recorded and be utilized for a targeted attack, because now you can get the username and passwords of individuals inside that organization. One way of ensuring this doesn't happen is to erect anti-drone technology on the roofs of buildings. So these are appearing all across Europe currently, and you can then shoot down any drone that comes into your corporate airspace. That's literally what this technology is doing. Unfortunately, not a lot of companies have updated Amazon of the installation of these technologies. So a number of delivery drones are being shot down in the process. And that's actually what makes Amazon quite mad about the flying pineapples and what is and how it plays out. However, unfortunately, some gangs in California got hold of the Harp-AG anti-drone gun. Now, the Harp-AG drone gun is manufactured in Turkey, and it's utilized for warfare as well as personal protection, where it would then completely disable a drone if it comes to close proximity. And a number of these gangs are now shooting down the delivery drones and stealing the packets on it. So yeah, it's becoming a bit of a headache for Amazon because they're really worried about anti-flying pineapple technology. So on that point, Johan, any questions, any comments? That's the first story. Amazon being furious about anti-flying pineapple technology, and suddenly this ridiculous sounding headline starts making a lot more sense. Johan, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, it feels as if you report on something that has already happened, but what you've told us now is something that's going to happen in 2023. Am I correct?
Well, I don't know about the date, Johan. I know it's going to happen at some point where, you know, drones will be shot down by accident, and they might be from, and we also believe that some drones will be hijacked and the packets they carry will be stolen due to this technology. That we can predict. When this will come to be, I don't know, but we guessed, yeah, you know, 2023 might be a good time to put that one down. So remember, when you talk about the future already happened, it's just unequally distributed. And unfortunately, we never know when it's going to happen. So I don't know if there's any questions or comments or any recommendations for a next story.
Anyone with a question, just show your hand if you want, or that if you saw a specific headline there in Pieter's index, then you can say which one you want him to discuss. But I'm sure, Pieter, it happened already. Sherry, you can unmute yourself and just say what you want to see.
Oh, super. Can you see me?
Yes,
I can,
see
Sherry.
you.
Okay. I was very interested in this idea of the corporations having the possibility to defend themselves with anti-drone technology. But many people also, for example, in the big banks, they are working from home. They're working from, their teams are all working from home. They're using all the Skype technology, Microsoft Teams, etc., to have all their meetings. And all this data is in private homes. Now, they can't all have, you know, rigged up this, what is it called? The Turkish Harp anti-age drone gun. Or, and then you even mentioned in the beginning about coffee shops. I mean, we all, you know, log into free Wi-Fi. It seems that only the with the dispersal now, the whole diaspora of working, how are they going to be able to defend themselves from these nasty little drones? Thank you.
So Sherry, the attack on a home would not be worth it because you'd only be able to hack into one Wi-Fi hotspot, and you only got one individual in the house that actually would type on it. And if you see both, you know, the chances of getting that hack is limited. But there are brilliant new technology. And what I'd like to do perhaps is speak about the death of stealth. That's an interesting story which links directly to cybersecurity. So the death of stealth, that is story number, where is it? Story number 17 on page 40. So let me go there and quickly talk about what that means. There's a fascinating technology or called quantum cryptography, and it is based around the concept of quantum entanglement. Now, I don't know if you're aware of quantum entanglement. This came out in the 1940s. So quantum entanglement is where you take two particles, and I might just quickly, I've got some videos on that. So there's brilliant videos on it that explains how it works. That you can take two particles in the subatomic world, be it electrons, photons, or whatever, and you can then entangle them. They then get a spin. We can call it a clockwise spin or an anti-clockwise spin or vertical or horizontal spin. But once they're entangled, you can then remove them from each other, but you wouldn't know what the entanglement of these two particles are. And you can literally take this one particle and send it to Mars, and you still wouldn't know. And then someone on Mars looks at that particle. And the moment they do, this one that you're looking at is then fixed. This is weird. Einstein called it spooky action at a distance. So quantum cryptography is based on this very premise. What you would normally do is you would, so by the way, if you want to ensure that no one listens in on your conversations in a hotspot, it's quite easy. You simply activate a virtual private network, a VPN. So there's millions of apps on the available, well, hundreds of thousands at least. So you activate a VPN, and the virtual private network then encrypts your data so that no one else can see what you are sending. That's one of the first steps that you take in order to protect your information, even at home. So what quantum cryptography does is that quantum computing can crack these codes quite easily. And what individuals are now doing is to swap out the keys on a daily basis. But here's the problem. You don't know if someone is intercepting the key as you send it to another person. And this process of sending an encryption key to another person for the day is now done via quantum cryptography, which means we use a fiber, we entangle the two particles and we send them. And the moment a hacker looks at that communication stream, the entanglement is broken, which means we know that someone is looking at our communication, which means that we then choose another route to send the key. And we can send it via cellular or whatever. There are different types of routes, but it now means that I can know if someone is intercepting my communication stream. And that's the beauty behind quantum cryptography. So this very premise that the two particles are entangled, and the moment you look at it, the other one is fixed, that means I can send them to two parties, and if anyone looks at that particle before the other person does, I know my communication has been compromised. The interesting thing about quantum cryptography and quantum entanglement is that it can be used for stealth as well. Normally with stealth aircraft, you have radar, radio detection and detecting and ranging, where you then get a bounce back from the surface where the radio wave hits. That's normally how radar works. And the whole stealth idea is to ensure that you don't reflect any radio waves. But now, the interesting thing about stealth radar is that you can take two particles, you entangle them, you look at the one and you send the other one into space. And if they keep on being entangled, you know it didn't hit anything. If, however, this radar hits an aircraft, you know that it hit something. There's nothing bouncing back. But the mere fact that these particles were entangled now allows you to know that there is an invader in the radar space around you. Now, currently, the radar can't give you a kill solution. It tells you there's an aircraft, but you can't utilize it for, in the current technological progress, for missile technology to shoot down the aircraft. And that's the basis behind the end of stealth, as a number of companies are now utilizing quantum entanglement in order to unlock new opportunities that didn't exist before. So in terms of computer security, we'll see that a huge amount of our security will move towards physics rather than mathematics to ensure a more secure communication environment. Hopefully that helps, Sherry.
I've got a request here from Derick to discuss number 13.
Millions lost in the virtual real estate bubble. All right.
You see, Derick has got a lot of real estate, so he's very keen on it.
Yeah, so there's some good money to be made before the bubble burst. And let me explain why.
There's a couple of real estate that you can purchase from, or a couple of real estate companies in the virtual real estate space. One of the better known ones is Second Life. They have an economy of about $500 million per year, and you can sell virtual artifacts into this space. A number of companies have launched their cars there, like Toyota. It's not a huge amount of support, but we are at the point of launching something called Horizons from Facebook, where you have VR goggles, and then you can go onto a city, or you can go onto an island or a space station, wherever you want to, and you can then purchase real estate for a couple of dollars, and you can build on that real estate, a house, an office, a building, or whatever. A number of architects are doing this to build a building in this VR space. They get their clients to come and join them in the VR space and show them what the building looks like before they make the final decision to build it. But in this VR space, as more and more people, and we have to realize in places like China, Japan, the population density is enormous. So the amount of people that live on a screen, either playing games, if you take a look at our kids, they play games, unfortunately, morning, noon, and night if we don't stop them. But we think that virtual reality is about to explode. And it also means that people will congregate in these virtual worlds. There's already on the Oculus Rift opportunity where you can dance with other people. You go into a nightclub, you meet 50 other people, and you're sitting at home and you're dancing. That's already there. My daughter's been doing it for the last year and a half. You can, when I'm away from home, I would put on my VR goggles, and then we would circumnavigate the globe by going from one city to another while my kids are sitting at home. It's an app called Wonder. But there's a variety of these environments where you can purchase some real estate, and that becomes your property. Now, the interesting thing is, as more and more people get involved, they spawn in these locations. And as they spawn, they see advertising, which means that as no one is watching TV advertisements anymore, how do you get your brand into the minds of the youth? You put it onto virtual real estate. So the story we wrote about was a spawning mechanism where a number of communities spawned based on language and region, where people then spawned, and you could then see look at the real estate which individuals then owned, they purchased it, and their prices went up due to the fact that advertisers want to get people's attention. And I wrote the story that they changed the spawning mechanism to rather look at personality and interest rather than geographical location. And this led to a number of real estate owners which lost a tremendous amount of money as people would then spawn in different locations because of the value that this provides through real estate. Now, this isn't new. We've seen this emerging about 10 years ago. And as I said before, the value of virtual assets in these locations is more than $500 million a year. If you think I'm kidding, I've already spent close to about R1,000 buying virtual clothes for my son's avatar in a game called Roblox. So everyone is playing Roblox, but if you go in, you kind of have got nothing. But if you then pay money, you get Robux. And with Robux, you can buy wings and a suit, and you can walk differently, and you can have extra special weapons. So this is what's happening, the increased value of virtual artifacts in a social environment. Not new, just a different angle.
Pieter, yeah, now suddenly there's a number of requests here. The first one is from Bernard. I couldn't see the number, but the topic says there is a CRISPR in my coffee.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so CRISPR stands for Clustered Regulatory Interspace Palindromic Repeats. This is what Jennifer Doudna, so CRISPR has been with us for 30 years. It's a way in which we can edit our genes. The CRISPR-Cas9, however, the Cas9 protein allows us to do it on human genes. So we can literally take out bad genetic information and rewrite it. This is currently utilized before a baby is born. So you can then realize after a DNA test that your unborn will be stuck with a certain disease. And this means you can alter the DNA. I, however, didn't use it in that context. I used it in terms of coffee, because what's happening with coffee is due to climate change, we're getting a tremendous amount of, or a threat of the current ecosystem which coffee is grown. That's South America and parts of Africa. And with global warming, we are seeing that the arable land that we can use for the cultivation of coffee is shrinking. So the only way for us to ensure that this is, that we can still purchase coffee in the future is to genetically, or to use genetic modification via CRISPR on coffee in order to ensure that this strain of coffee can continue. And the story was all around some, what can we call them, aficionados of coffee that said, listen, I don't want any genetic mutation in coffee. I want the original coffee, and a special high price would be paid for original coffee. And you can then have a special verification service that would allow you to verify that the base strands that you have analyzed in coffee is of the pure coffee strand, either Arabica or not any of the other coffees. And that was the story. You know, people hawking towards purity and not in allowing DNA changes in their coffee that they drink on a daily basis. So that was the story about the CRISPR in my coffee.
Good. The next one, Pieter, is from Angela, Tomato Granny. I didn't see that.
Oh, yeah. There's a fantastic, do you know what page it's on, Johan?
No, I didn't see the number either.
I'll quickly take a look. So Tomato Granny,
Page 24. So let's go to page 24. There's a fantastic piece of technology that you can acquire right now called the Molecular Scanner. This cost you about 2,000 Rand, 2,000 to 3,000 Rand. And it allows you to scan any matter. Could it be rocks, water, produce, and then you will get an analysis of it on your device. So it's already available, you can purchase it. So we wrote a story about this lady in Italy that after losing her husband decided she is going to become, she's going to test the local produce in a supermarket. So she grabbed one of these scanners and started scanning the tomatoes and guavas and apples, which were said to be grown without any pesticides. And she picked up that there were pesticides on these apples, at which point she started her own Twitter and Instagram feed and, called the company to account. And she started doing this as a hobby. So right now, all of the companies are running scared of her because she's analyzing all of the produce to see if it is organic and it has been grown without any pesticides. It's a wonderful piece of technology called the SCIO scanner. You'll see a screen of it. It's called SCIO. And this allows you to scan the quality of water. If you can actually scan wine, and if you have a database of it, you can become a pseudo wine connoisseur by just scanning the wine, and then the chemical analysis will tell you exactly what wine it is. So that's the technology, and that's what's the story.
Interesting. There's 2 requests for the Cape Town story, but I'll get back to that now. Just before that, from Marjorie, demise of the USA.
That was one where we are not predicting the demise of the USA, but we are talking about the monetary future of the US. So, there's been this, question about a divide where America is going to break in 3. The East Coast, the West Coast, and then the Bible Belt, because we see over and over again, looking at the voting patterns, that these states always vote in one direction, and then the presidency is only available to some swing states that make the final decision about who's president. And the states, or the United States, is a function of a decision by the states itself. So if the states would then say, hold on, we are removing ourselves from the federation, they might then create their own states. That might be a reality in the future. What I've written about is more the monetary regime that might emerge in these 3 states. So I spoke about the East Coast, the West Coast, and Bible Belt. And the East Coast is where you have all of the financial firms. This is Wall Street, Chicago, a lot of money that flows, that keeps up the economy. And therefore, the utilization of the dollar, the US dollar in years ahead, would still remain one of the most important elements to keep that economy going. The Bible Belt is more conservative, and they say that all fiat currencies will become zero. In the past, we had more than 2,000 fiat currencies. They've all failed, and their value is now zero. If you take a look at the amount of notes that people have printed, in the past, the note was a promise for gold stuck somewhere. This was broken down in 1971 by Nixon. And currently, the money that we are printing is based on debt. So more than 50% of the value of the dollar is currently based on debt monetization. So what literally happens is that the government puts out bonds, the primary dealers buys them, and then the Reserve Bank buys it back from the primary dealers. Kind of a shell game where 50% of the value of each dollar currently being printed is based by debt that someone has to pay in the future. So the dollar is currently an IOU of an IOU with no real foundation behind it other than the trust that people have in each other and its use as a currency. And that's also the foundation behind Bitcoin. So that's the idea behind it, that the guys in the Bible Belt would like to have a monetary unit that's backed by gold, seeing that that's the only way that they could maintain its purchasing power. And then on the East Coast, a very interesting experiment. So here's an interesting story. There is a town in the middle of Austria called Vurgel, and they played around with a concept called demirage. I don't know if the participants in the call know about it and know what demirage is. Okay, so what they did in the small town, they took all the money that they had, they put it in a bank, and then they created their own monetary unit, but they put something very interesting on it. They said, this note, and I think I have a picture of it here. No, I don't. Oh boy. Okay. I'll find this note of this town called Vogel. And what they've done is that every week, this note loses 1% of its value, and that you need to pay a tax of 1% to then reactivate the use of the note in the next week. What this did is it created an enormous velocity of the currency. So normally the velocity of a currency, and this is what America is struggling with, they printed this huge amount of money, via the banks, and the Reserve Bank backed it up, but there's no velocity. So normally in a healthy functioning economy, the velocity is anywhere between 9 and 12. That means I get a salary, I pay someone money for the fuel I put in. They take the money and they buy something else. So the velocity is normally 12 times. Currently, the velocity of the US dollar is about 6, and it's even falling. The same is happening with the euro. So they've got the huge amount of money. The liquidity is good, but the velocity is just haywire. And what the guys at Virgil have done is they put the money that they had in a bank account, created their own notes, but they created a concept of demurrage where the value of these notes lost money every single week. Now, this meant that you would then take this note and you want to get rid of it as quickly as you possibly can. And what happened is that this velocity went upwards to about 300 times. So that means that this note went haywire, because you don't want to be stuck with a note at the end of the week, which loses 1% of the money. You'd rather spend it now, and anyone that gets hold of it starts spending it again. And this led to this unbelievable economic boom in this town. They built bridges and roads and you name it, because guess what? That's what we do. You know, we work with these little pieces of money, and it only has value because everyone believes that it has value. But by repurposing it and creating an element of demurrage, it created this unbelievable revolution where the entire town bloomed after 2 years. And then all the towns in that area said, hey, we want to do the same, at which point in time the government shut it down, because if that would have happened, no one would have used the legal tender of the government, which would have meant that the value of the legal tender of the government would have disappeared. So that's the foundation behind fiat currency. And what I'm writing around on the West Coast states is that everyone's talking about green. So the problem is that we currently have is that government is printing money for the main purpose of keeping the economy going. This helicopter money that you hear about in the news right now, that's the problem. You need that money to be circulating in the economy to sustain the economy. What, however, has happened? More than 50% of the money that people received from the government, that paid off all debt. That meant, hey, there was no real growth, real growth in the economy. I'm speaking under correction, but I'm thinking that the amount of money that circulated in the economy after all that money that's been given to people is less than 30%. So utilizing digital demurrage, you can now, from a Reserve Bank perspective, give someone money and say, listen, you can use this money, but if you don't spend this money in the economy, I will deduct money from it. So this is a way in which governments can force their citizens to spend money to keep the economy going, rather than keep the money under the mattress. And you can also link green initiatives to it. So for example, if you spend money at a company that hasn't got green credentials, the government can then levy a 2% tax on the purchase of any purchase you make to force companies to become green. So by creating a digital currency, which China have already done, and which the US and a variety of others are looking at, this digital currency will then be controlled by the government, and they can then link certain taxation to it based on its application in the economy. And specifically with a new monetary theory and helicopter money, they can then say, if we give you the money, we can actually decide how you should spend it. And in order to keep the economy going, that could be one of the ways. So it's called a digital demurrage. It's a concept that I played around with. We haven't seen it before, but I believe that it might be on our future. And that was the reason behind it, that in America, they will actually split apart based on these three mindsets. Some that will try and retain the dollar's hegemony worldwide, although it might be open for competition in the next 3 to 4 years as a world currency. Secondly, some people saying, you know what, I only want my currency backed by gold. It has been the primary store of value for the last 3,000 years. I'm sticking with that. And then there's a group of people that say, I'll use a digital currency. But when you do that, you could then open it up to the digital demurrage that I've just explained. And I've done that in detail in the article.
Okay, another request here, Pieter, is from both Sherry and Derick. Cape Town 2022. What is food for one is poison for another.
All right. There's actually 2 stories linked to this, and I think on those 2 we'll have to call it a day, Johan. I think we're far over our time allocation. So
you can right now analyze your DNA through a company called 23andMe. You can then get an analysis of your own profile. I, for example, have got the ApoE4 allele. And if I would, for example, contract the COVID-19 disease or the SARS-CoV-2 virus, my body would overreact to any infection. So I am really on knife's edge on that virus specifically, because it also means that I have a very high chance of getting Alzheimer's, mainly because my body does not remove glucose from my bloodstream as effectively as others. And because any additional sugar that I might have in my system or insulin resistance would mean that my body would struggle removing the sugar, and it wouldn't get to my brain at night to remove the sugar or the amyloid betas from it, which means that I stand a very high chance of getting Alzheimer's. I've got both the ApoE epsilon 4 alleles, both of them. So that means I have 12 times higher, or 1,200% higher chance of getting Alzheimer's than anyone else. So one of the ways in which you can manage this is a process called epigenetics. So your DNA is inside your chromosomes. It spins out every now and again, then goes through messenger RNA, it strips out and then creates a protein which does the job in your body. And there's wonderful videos on the net that explains how that process works. But epigenetics mean that you could reject certain, so your DNA is like the ingredients in your kitchen. So what is in your kitchen cupboard? There's canola oil and olive oil and motor oil, and I unfortunately have motor oil as part of my kitchen. That's what my DNA tells me. By looking at my lifestyle, I can, however, force my body to change the recipe so that the protein that comes out does not use motor oil that under normal circumstances it would. So if I would, for example, have a heavy grain diet, if I have a huge amount of fats, normal milk, a huge amount of sugar, then my chances of getting Alzheimer's shoot through the roof. What this, however, does is by changing my diet, going from casein A1 to casein A2 milk, goat milk or so forth, even almond milk, staying away from so in my diet, I need to cut my carbs to about 5%, which is sometimes difficult, but this allows me to live a healthier life because I changed the epigenetics, and that's directly linked to lifestyle and diet. What you can do right today is you can take your DNA and put it in a blockchain, and every time someone accesses it, you can then authorize it. But if you trust your dietary provider, now I know what food to buy, but sometimes I need to do research to figure out what it is, and it takes a bit of a process. The article I've written is where you have a trusted intermediary, which would then not release all of your DNA data, but only the necessary data to ensure that when you log in on an online buying platform, that you have a color coding of the food that you purchase. So you would have a green, which means buy the food. You have a orange and you have a red. Red, stay away from. Orange, use caution. And green, quite beneficial. It's already being utilized so the concept is already being utilized by Discovery. They look at the type of food you buy and then give you additional bonus points if you live a healthy lifestyle. This takes it one step further by making it personal, by linking that to your own DNA. So that's the idea behind it, that you have an interactive supermarket that is linked to your DNA profile and gives you guidance about what food is good for you and which isn't, to help you with epigenetics. But the real story is not your DNA. The real story is your gut microbiome. And that's where the other story comes in, Johan. So I'll just quickly tell you what's going on there. So your superior priced or high price paid for superior stool samples, page 47. So let me take you through this. They've realized there's a number of we call it gut bugs, your friendly gut bugs or your gut biomes. And in my article, I've looked at medical research that have shown there's certain bacteria that is very beneficial for your health. They've looked at a number of individuals that has got 100 years behind them. And they looked at their gut bacteria and realized there's a huge amount of these strains resident in individuals that live to a healthy old age. They also did studies on people that die younger, and that gut bacteria wasn't there. Now, that isn't causation, correlation is a big debate. I don't want to go into it, but there seemed to be a huge amount of very healthy gut bacteria, which is removed out of our diet because we unified our diet around certain foods and because of the overuse of medicine. So you need a healthy gut bacteria. And there's articles upon articles about how individuals had a fecal transplant and how it changed their diet completely. For example, on one mouse that became quite fat, they took his feces, transplanted into a thin mouse, and within a week or two, the other mouse became fat. So your gut biome plays a fundamental role, not only on your psychological health, but your health as a whole. And I wrote the story that you don't want to do a fecal transplant if it's not needed. So you're looking at some fecal matter that has got all the gut bacteria that you need. And these actually go for a high price. And that's why some individuals are getting a very high price for their gut bacteria before they do a fecal transplant. That's the story. Oh, and then towards the end, I joked around a bit with certain charlatans that promised a fecal transplant and then didn't use the superior matter, and that led to a couple of very interesting results, but you'll read about that in the article.
Pieter, yes, thank you very much. I think we can go on and go right through this book, but luckily, as you all know, the book will be available, and the link is already in the chat panel, but I'll also include it in the registration form. Pieter, I mean, it's difficult to judge and say, is this all tongue-in-cheek, or this is a serious attempt based on your research and your interpretation of where things are going? It's not a tongue-in-the-cheek book.
So all the theory, the medical knowledge, the physics behind it is all real. It's absolute. And at the end of the book, I have made available all the reference notes. So at the end of the book, you'll actually get reference notes to everything. So you'll find out exactly where I found what information from. So when I talk about a technology, it exists. We just don't know how it will play out in the next couple of years and how society will react to it. So what is the science fiction part is how it plays out and how humanity embraces the technology or not, and how it plays out in our normal reaction to certain technologies. But the foundation behind it is solid. If I talk about gut biomes, I've done the research to figure out which gut biomes are beneficial for you. When I speak about a technology, for example, the DNA and the blockchain, it exists. So from a scientific perspective, it's a solid book, but from a prediction perspective, your guess is really wrong.
Thank you, Pieter. Fascinating. And yeah, we'll continue it afterwards with emails. You're welcome to send me the comments that I'll pass on to Pieter. The next section is, I didn't know I can do that. Now today's tutorial introduces you to a very useful app for both Android and Apple iOS phones. The app is called Waze, W-A-Z-E. Now Waze is a comprehensive navigation app for both main roads and off-roads. And as you will see, this app offers more features and information than Google Maps. Derick, who you also know as a previous presenter, Derick prepared an introductory video for Waze. And I'm going to post the link in the chat panel so that we can all watch it at the same time and then ask questions afterwards for Derick. So the way it will work, some of you have been in Zoom meetings where we've done this before. I will post the link in the chat panel. You must all open your chat panel. And then I will count down and say 3, 2, 1, go. When I say go, you click on the link, which will then open the YouTube video in your internet browser. We've just found from previous experiences that this is the best way to watch the video, the best quality that you actually watch it on your own computer. The only problem potentially is that we don't all start exactly the same time and all finish at the same time, but it will be within a few seconds. So the video is 6 minutes long, and just make sure once you've completed watching the video that you return to the Zoom meeting window. Don't close the Zoom meeting window, but once you've watched the video, just click and make your Zoom meeting the active window again. So is there any questions? Are everyone familiar with where to find the chat panel? If I put it there and you will click on it. Okay, so I'm going to do that. Just also remain muted, otherwise we hear everyone else's feedback from the YouTube video. I will post it now and then I'll do the countdown. You should see the link now. So let's go. 3, 2, 1, go.
If you have ever had to navigate to an unfamiliar destination, chances are that you have used a turn-by-turn GPS navigation application such as the well-known Google Maps application for Android or Apple iOS or its web-based interface. A lesser-known alternative to Google Maps is the community-driven application named Waze. Waze provides real-time traffic updates plus some social and geogaming elements that might make commuting fun. The app does not predict optimum routes by simply referring to official speed limits, but utilizes machine learning algorithms which are continuously fed with information from live users, which it then analyzes to calculate and provide real-time directions that are adjusted on the fly to account for dynamic conditions. Time for a couple of tips and tricks. 1. Pick the best route. After you plug in a destination, Waze will choose the best route, but will also provide alternative routes. Tap the Routes button and you'll see other routes that you can take. On the list view, you can see if there are items such as traffic accidents, construction zones, or police control points ahead. On the map view, you can see how the suggested routes differ. Make your selection and tap Go. 2. Find the best time to leave. Waze can tell you how your trip will be affected by traffic based on your departure time. After plugging in your destination, tap View More Times, and you can scroll down to see how drive time is affected by what time you want to arrive. Hit Save, and Waze will alert you when it's time to leave. You can also use this feature by tapping Planned Drives on the search panel. 3. Share your ETA. Let your spouse or friend know what your expected time of arrival will be. Tap the status bar at the bottom of the map and then tap Share Drive to fire off a text or WhatsApp message with your arrival time, along with a link that will let someone follow your drive in real time. 4. Add a stop. You are also able to insert a previously unscheduled stop into your route. Tap the search icon at the bottom of the map to search for fuel, food, coffee, or any additional destination. Click Go, and then tap Add a stop. Waze will insert this destination into your route and adjust the optimal routes and your ETA automatically. 5. Watch your speed. By default, Waze will warn you when you are speeding. Go to Settings, Speedometer, When to show alert, and you can change it from at speed limit to a selected buffer above speed limit. You can also choose to always show the speed limit alongside your current speed, or only when driving above the speed limit. 6. plan your route on a desktop device. If you find the smaller screen of your phone difficult to use, you could plan and set up your route on a desktop device by accessing the Waze live map via a web browser such as Google Chrome, and then simply sending the route to your cell phone for navigation purposes. Seven, use voice directions and turn the screen off. Waze could use quite a bit of your phone's battery capacity, as by default it normally requires the phone's GPS and screen to be turned on at all times. So be sure you turn the phone screen off and use the voice directions which Waze provides while navigating routes for you. Even if you plug in your phone to keep it charged while driving, it is a good idea to keep your eyes on the road and use your ears for directions, as this might not only save battery life, but possibly also human life. 8. Use your own voice. Voice directions can be customized if you go to Settings, Voice and Sound, Waze Voice. You can choose from a wide selection of voices and languages, including English and Afrikaans. You are even able to record and utilize voice directions in your own voice. Choose the required phrase and hit the red recording button. Click play to check for clarity and save. 9. Click the bright orange button and report. Waze users actively update one another on traffic jams, accidents, hazards, police control points, map issues, and more. Because the Waze maps are user community generated, the more people use it, the better it gets. I'll just quickly take you to the Waze screen. So Waze itself was created originally as an Israeli company. It was a startup there. All of the maps inside Waze is user sourced. It comes from the community. People actually drive the routes, and the community actually edit the maps. Waze had a lot of functions inside it that apps such as Google Maps did not normally have. What has happened subsequently is that Google has actually purchased Waze, and they've decided to keep running it as a separate product, but they use Waze and feed off it to make information available inside Google Maps as well. So nowadays you'll see that Waze and Google Maps tend to move closer together in terms of functionality. Things such as the speed limit and your current speed, which you can see in Waze, never used to be available in Google Maps. They recently launched that in Google Maps. Some of the interactive functionalities such as marking road hazards or potholes or accidents or things such as that have also recently started popping up in Google Maps. So a lot of things are typically sort of prototyped within Waze and then eventually find its way to Google Maps. Okay, sure. So to get to more information about it, you can just go to waze.com in your browser. And I just clicked on this option here, which is Live Map, similar to Google Maps on your computer. And you can see this is actually live information that you can see here. If there are any traffic jams, those areas will show up in red. There somebody has marked police presence. There somebody has marked a pothole. If you drive this road, as you approach that point, this will actually pop up and warn you about the pothole. You as a user then have an option to say, yes, it's still there, or no, it's not there, or you can add a comment. So it's very interactive in terms of that. If somebody's marked that police presence, for instance, and you drive past there and there's no one there, you can just quickly mark it and say not present, and it will automatically immediately update the map for other users.
Well, Mike, that one pothole that he showed there is right next to you, so you can witness to that. Another question that I asked Derick the first time we reviewed this was, you know, in South Africa, often, especially on the N2 into Cape Town, there's often protests and burning tires in the road. Now, is there a way for Waze to actually show you that? And yes, he indicated to me it might not be called a protest or a tire burning, but it might be called a road closure. And that's also community based. So the first person who happened to get to this road closure will indicate it on the map, and then it will appear if you're on that same route. If you get to it and the road is now suddenly open, then obviously, just like he said now, you can just indicate that, and then the next person will see there's no, or the road is clear. So very useful, especially if you drive around a lot. And it's not only for main roads, as I've said in the beginning, it's also for off-roads, which Derick is very familiar with. Thanks, Derick. Okay, our next meeting is on Wednesday, the 27th of January. Now, there's a few changes to this meeting, so please just take note of the following. The first change is, based on the feedback from you, I've decided to have only one topic per meeting from now onwards, just like we had today. I think it just allows a more in-depth discussion and also more time for questions. And depending on I don't know, I can do that, we can deal with it the same way that we've looked at Waze now. The topic in January will be about internet connectivity. All the different types of connectivity, from fiber to satellites, the differences, the specifications of each type, what's available today and what to expect in future. It will be presented by Leon Staphorst. He's from the CSIR. Leon is a director of the South African National Research Network called SANREN. They are tasked to develop internet connectivity for all the tertiary institutions in South Africa. And he's been part of that since 2013. So you can understand that he's got a wealth of knowledge about internet connectivity. Unfortunately, Leon, the presenter on the day, has other commitments from 11 o'clock onwards. So the third change here is I've decided to move the start of the meeting an hour earlier to 9 o'clock instead of 10 o'clock. So we will start at 9 o'clock. I hope that suits everyone. Please make a note, but I will send out the reminders also before the meeting, but we will start at 9 o'clock so that we do finish or give him enough time to go to his other commitment at 11. The other change of that meeting, and this is not tongue-in-cheek, this is true, I will be away on the day of the meeting, but I hope that I will be able to host it from the place somewhere in the bushveld where I'll be. As a backup, I've already made arrangements with Derick and Mike and also to Leon, the presenter, and we will test the hosting before the time. So as far as you are concerned, it should be exactly the same as today. But I will inform you with a follow-up newsletter. Okay, then we get to the registration form and the links. Again, the registration form will ask your email address and your rating. I mean, it should take you less than 3 minutes to complete. And thank you to everyone who's always leaving comments or suggestions or future topics in the registration forms. I will also send out all the links that we referred to today as well. They are included in the registration form, but I will also send it out afterwards. So just before I paste the link to the registration form, are there any other questions or comments or concerns from anyone? Okay, I'm going to post the link now. Now just remember, Sherry wants to say something. Sherry, you're welcome. Just unmute yourself.
What is the timeline for our comments on the book? We're going to send our comments on the various stories to you, Johan, by email, do I understand, for you to pass on to Pieter. But what is our timeline?
Oh, hi, Sherry. Please, there's no rush. I'm planning to add some more stories to it and to do a forward. So I'm going to only do that in about 2 or 3 months from now. So
Okay.
there's absolutely no rush, and it's only if you feel that you want to share something, your any comment would be appreciated.
Thank you.
So in short, you can send it at any time and I will make sure that it gets to Pieter. Thank you, Sherry. Okay, nothing else. So I'm going to paste the link. Just remember, you can click on the link and it will open the registration form in your browser, and please keep it open even when this meeting ends. Just keep that open, complete it and submit your response. So there is the link. I've just posted it there. You can click on it now and start completing it. And that's the end of our meeting. Thanks again very much to Pieter for his presentation, and to Derick for his contribution with Waze, and to everyone else who's attended here. And I'll see you in the new year.
Thank you for the opportunity to share my ideas with you. I really appreciate it. Thank you, one and for everyone involved.